It was a normal Tuesday when my life changed forever. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through my phone, trying not to think about how empty the house felt since Dad left. Mom had been quiet lately, more thoughtful, like she was carrying something heavy inside her. That afternoon, she walked in with a smile I hadn't seen in months and said, "I have something to tell you." She didn't say it like it was bad. But I still felt my stomach twist. She told me she'd met someone. A man named Daniel. They'd been dating for a few months, and things were getting serious. At first, I just nodded. I mean, I wanted her to be happy, right? It wasn't like I expected her to stay alone forever. But then came the part that really hit me. He had a son. A boy my age, Ethan, and they were getting married. Soon, which meant, he was going to move in. With us. I tried to act cool about it. I shrugged and said okay. But inside, everything felt weird. I didn't know what to expect. Was this guy going to try to replace my dad? Would he pretend to care until he realized I wasn't worth the effort? And what about his son? What kind of person would he be? Would he hate me? Or worse, ignore me completely? The next few weeks passed in a blur. There were dinners at Daniel's house, awkward conversations, forced smiles. I mostly kept to myself, watching how my mom laughed with him, how comfortable they seemed together. It made me feel like an outsider in my own life. Then came the day Ethan officially moved in. Boxes everywhere. My room suddenly felt smaller, like the space around me was shrinking. He was taller than I expected. Quiet, but not shy. He had dark hair, deep brown eyes, and this way of looking at you like he saw more than you wanted him to. We barely spoke that first week. Just polite greetings and silent moments passing each other in the hallway. I told myself I didn't care. That this was just another thing I had to deal with now. But one night, everything shifted. Everyone else had gone to bed. I couldn't sleep, so I went downstairs to get a drink. He was already there, sitting on the couch with a book in his lap. The light from the lamp cast soft shadows across his face. When he saw me, he smiled, not a big, fake one, but a real one. I hesitated, then sat down on the opposite end of the couch. We started talking. About nothing important at first. Music, school, stupid stuff. But it felt easy, like we'd known each other longer than we had. He had this calm energy, like being around him made everything less loud inside my head. At some point, I caught myself laughing, really laughing, and I hadn't realized how long it had been since I did that. That night should have been nothing. Just a random moment between two people who were now stuck living together. But it wasn't. Something changed after that, not in a dramatic way. Just a small shift, like the air between us got heavier. I started noticing little things about him, how he always said good morning before grabbing coffee, how he never complained when Mom asked him to help clean up dinner. And maybe it was just loneliness. Maybe I was reading too much into it. But every time I looked at him, I felt something stir inside me. Something I wasn't ready to name yet. Something I definitely wasn't allowed to feel. Because no matter how easy it was to talk to him, no matter how much I liked being around him, he was my stepbrother now. And whatever this was growing between us, it was supposed to stay buried. It took a few weeks for everything to settle into something that almost felt normal. I kept telling myself that, this is normal now asterisk. Waking up in the same house as him, sharing meals, brushing past each other in the hallway without saying much. But no. Matter how hard I tried to make it feel ordinary, there was always this undercurrent between us, like an invisible thread pulling tighter every day. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just subtle, the way he'd glance at me when he thought I wasn't looking, the way his voice softened when he said my name, like he was testing how it fit on his tongue. At first, we didn't really talk beyond polite exchanges. Good morning. Pass the salt. You left your headphones downstairs. That was it. But slowly, things started to shift again. One evening, I was sitting on the couch scrolling through my phone while he watched some show with the volume low. I wasn't paying attention until he paused it and asked, "Do you ever listen to music when you study?" I looked over, surprised he was even talking to me. I nodded and told him I did, mostly indie stuff or ambient beats. He smiled and pulled out his earbuds, handing them to me. "Try this," he said. I hesitated but put them in anyway. The song playing was soft, dreamy, not what I expected from him. When I raised an eyebrow, he laughed. "What, you think I only listen to heavy metal and rap?" I smirked and handed them back, but the tension that had been building between us for days finally cracked open into something lighter. From that moment on, things got easier. We found ourselves falling into routines, small ones, but real ones. He'd leave little notes stuck to the fridge with weird quotes or inside jokes about things we'd talked about the night before. Sometimes he'd text me random songs he thought I'd like, even though we weren't technically supposed to be close. And I caught myself doing the same, saving lyrics I thought described the way I felt around him, or sending him memes just because they made me laugh and I wanted to share them with someone. But it wasn't just the little things. There were moments that felt bigger, heavier, like the air would thicken whenever we were alone together. Like that time I came out of the shower one morning and ran into him in the hallway. I was still drying my hair with a towel wrapped around my waist, and he stopped mid-step. His eyes flickered down, then quickly back up, and he muttered a quick apology before walking away. I stood there, heart pounding, trying to figure out if I'd imagined the way his breath hitched for just a second. Or the time I was having a rough day, nothing dramatic, just one of those days where everything feels too heavy and you don't know why. I was sitting outside on the porch steps, trying not to cry, when he came out and sat beside me without a word. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just sat there, quiet and steady, like he knew I needed someone to exist next to me without forcing me to explain anything. Eventually, I whispered, "Thanks," and he just nodded. That was enough. I told myself I was imagining things. That the way my stomach flipped when he smiled at me was just nerves. That the way I caught myself watching him when he thought I wasn't looking meant nothing. But deep down, I knew better. I could feel it creeping in, this slow, dangerous pull toward him that I couldn't stop, even if I wanted to. And maybe he felt it too. There were times when I thought I saw it in his eyes, this flicker of something more than friendship, more than sibling-like affection. Like he was holding himself back from saying something he wasn't allowed to say. Like he was fighting the same battle I was, trying to pretend we were just two guys living under the same roof who happened to get along. But pretending only works for so long. And the longer we lived side by side, the harder it became to ignore the truth growing between us. A truth I wasn't ready to face yet, but one that was getting louder with every shared silence, every lingering glance, every accidental touch that sent sparks through my skin. Because no matter how many times I told myself this wasn't real, wasn't possible, my heart didn't seem to care. It started with a question I couldn't stop thinking about. One night, after everyone else had gone to bed and the house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator downstairs, I found myself staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment I'd shared with him over the past few weeks. The way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. The way his voice softened when we talked late into the night. The way my chest tightened every time our hands accidentally brushed while reaching for the same thing, like there was something electric between us that neither of us could explain. And then, in the middle of all those thoughts, one question rose above the rest, sharp and undeniable: what if I'm falling for him? Asterisk. I rolled onto my side, pressing my face into the pillow like I could smother the thought before it took root. But it didn't go away. It stayed there, gnawing at me, growing louder each time I saw him. At first, I tried to laugh it off, telling myself I was just lonely or bored or going through some weird phase. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't just a crush. This wasn't just teenage confusion. This was real, and it terrified me. The next morning, I avoided him as much as I could. I stayed in my room longer than usual, pretending to be asleep even though I heard him knock on my door. When I finally came downstairs, he was already sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, flipping through his phone. He looked up when I walked in and gave me a small smile, the kind that made my stomach twist. "Morning," he said, like nothing was wrong. Like he didn't know what I was feeling. I nodded back and grabbed a glass of water, trying to keep my hands steady. But the more I tried to push the feelings away, the stronger they got. There were moments throughout the day when I caught myself watching him without meaning to, how his hair fell over his forehead when he leaned forward, how his fingers tapped rhythmically against whatever surface he was touching, how his eyes crinkled slightly when he laughed. Every little thing about him felt like a secret I wasn't supposed to notice. That evening, we ended up alone again. Mom and Daniel had gone out for dinner, leaving us with an awkward silence that stretched between us like a tightrope. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, not talking, just listening to the quiet hum of the TV in the background. I kept stealing glances at him, wondering if he could feel it too, this invisible pull, this tension that never seemed to go away no matter how hard I tried to pretend it wasn't there. Eventually, he turned to me, his expression unreadable. "You've been acting weird lately," he said quietly. His voice was calm, but there was something behind it, something careful, like he was testing the waters. I swallowed hard and shrugged. "I don't know what you mean." He tilted his head slightly, studying me. "Yeah, you do." I looked away, focusing on the blank screen in front of us. "It's nothing," I muttered. There was a pause, and then he shifted closer. Not enough to touch me, but close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "You can talk to me," he said softly. "You know that, right?" I wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck in my throat. How could I explain what I barely understood myself? How could I tell him that every time I looked at him, I felt like I was standing on the edge of something huge and terrifying? That I wanted to reach out and grab hold of whatever this was between us, even though I knew it wasn't safe. Instead, I whispered, "Have you ever thought about being with someone?" His breath hitched slightly, and I could feel his gaze burning into the side of my face. "Yeah," he said after a long pause. "I have." I finally turned to look at him, searching his expression for any sign of what he meant. "When?" I asked, my voice barely audible. His jaw tightened, and for a second, I thought he might not answer. Then he said, "Sometimes, I think about it more than I should." My heart pounded in my chest. "What do you mean by that?" He shook his head slowly, like he was trying to figure out how to explain something he wasn't ready to say out loud. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to want someone the way people are supposed to let yourself feel it, even if it doesn't make sense." I stared at him, my mind racing. Was he saying what I thought he was saying? Or was I just projecting everything I was feeling onto him? I opened my mouth to ask another question, but before I could speak, he looked away, breaking the connection between us. "I shouldn't have said that," he muttered, rubbing a hand over his face. And just like that, the moment passed. We didn't talk about it again that night. We went back to pretending like nothing had happened, like the air between us wasn't charged with something unspoken. But I couldn't forget it. I couldn't forget the way he'd looked at me, the way his voice had cracked slightly when he spoke. And most of all, I couldn't forget the way my heart had raced, knowing that maybe, just maybe, he was feeling the same thing I was. Even though we both knew we weren't supposed to, it was raining the day it happened. Not just a light drizzle, but the kind of storm that made the whole world feel like it had been wrapped in a thick, heavy blanket. The sky was dark, even though it was only early afternoon, and the sound of the rain tapping against the windows created this soft, constant rhythm that somehow made everything feel more intimate. We were alone in the house, Mom and Daniel had gone out to run errands, and we'd been left behind with nothing better to do than hang around and wait for them to come back. We ended up on the couch together, watching some old movie neither of us really cared about. It was one of those quiet moments where conversation wasn't necessary, where just being near each other felt enough. But something was different that day. There was this tension between us, not loud or aggressive, but deep and simmering, like it had been building for weeks and was finally reaching its breaking point. I remember how he sat close to me without actually touching me, his knee brushing mine every time he shifted. I remember how the room felt smaller than usual, like the walls were closing in and leaving no space for escape. And I remember how, when the movie ended, neither of us moved. The screen went black, but we stayed there, sitting in silence, both of us pretending we weren't feeling whatever it was we were feeling. Then, slowly, he turned toward me. There was something in his eyes, something raw and unguarded, like he was standing at the edge of a cliff and trying to decide whether or not to jump. He didn't say anything, just looked at me, and for the first time since all of this started, I couldn't look away. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he might hear it. Every part of me was screaming at me to move, to get up, to pretend like nothing was happening, but I couldn't. I was frozen, caught in whatever moment was unfolding between us. And then he kissed me. It was soft, barely more than a brush of his lips against mine, but it felt like lightning striking through my entire body. My breath caught in my throat, and for a second, I forgot how to breathe. His hand came up to rest lightly on my jaw, his fingers warm against my skin, and I could feel him trembling just slightly, like he wasn't sure if I would pull away or kiss him back. I didn't pull away. Instead, I leaned into him, letting my hand find its way to his shoulder, grounding myself in the reality of what was happening. His lips parted slightly, and I felt his exhale against my mouth before he kissed me again, deeper this time, slower, like he was trying to memorize the shape of me. I responded instinctively, my fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt as I pulled him closer. It should have felt wrong. It should have felt like the worst mistake we could ever make. But it didn't. It felt like coming home after being lost for too long. It felt like finding something I hadn't realized I was missing. But just as quickly as it started, it stopped. He pulled back first, his breathing uneven, his eyes wide with something that looked dangerously close to fear. I stared at him, my heart still racing, my lips tingling from where his had just been. Neither of us spoke. The silence between us was deafening, filled with everything we weren't saying. Then he whispered, "Oh God, I shouldn't have done that." I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. Why not? His eyes searched mine, like he was looking for an answer he couldn't find. Because we're not supposed to want this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because you're my stepbrother, and I'm not supposed to feel this way about you." I let out a shaky breath. What if I want to feel this way anyway? He shook his head, pulling his hands away from me like he was afraid he'd touch me again if he didn't put distance between us. "No," he muttered. "This can't happen. We can't let it happen." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him that maybe rules weren't always right, that maybe love didn't care about lines drawn in the sand. But I didn't, because I knew he was right. I knew that what we had just done crossed a line we weren't supposed to cross, and now there was no going back. We sat there for a while longer, neither of us moving, neither of us speaking. The rain outside had slowed to a gentle patter, but inside, everything felt chaotic. Eventually, he stood up, running a hand through his hair like he was trying to shake off whatever had just happened. "I'm gonna go take a walk," he said, not looking at me. "I need air." And then he was gone, leaving me alone on the couch with nothing but the echo of his footsteps and the lingering warmth of his kiss still burning against my lips. After that night, things changed. We didn't talk about it. We didn't acknowledge it, but it was there, hanging over us like a shadow we couldn't escape. We went back to pretending like nothing had happened, like we were just two guys living under the same roof who happened to get along. But the truth was, everything had changed. I found myself avoiding him more often than not, scared that if we were alone together again, I wouldn't be able to stop myself from doing something stupid. And when we were in the same room, there was this invisible wall between us, thicker than before, built from guilt and confusion in the weight of what we'd done. He kept his distance too, but sometimes I'd catch him watching me, this unreadable expression on his face, like he was fighting some internal battle he didn't know how to win. There were moments when I thought he might say something, when his mouth would open slightly, like words were trying to escape, but then he'd close it again, like he decided better of it. And the worst part, I missed him, not just his presence, but the way he used to look at me before everything got complicated. The way he used to smile at me like I mattered. I missed the easy conversations, the late night talks, the little notes he used to leave for me. All of it felt like it belonged to someone else now, like it had been taken from us the moment our lips touched. But no matter how much I missed it, I knew one thing for certain. We couldn't go back. Whatever this was between us, it had already gone too far to pretend it didn't exist. And no matter how hard we tried to bury it, I knew one thing deep in my bones. That kiss had changed everything. It started with silence, the kind that stretched too long, filled with everything we weren't saying. The days after the kiss felt like walking through water, slow and heavy, every movement dragging under the weight of what had happened between us. We didn't talk about it. We didn't even look at each other the same way anymore. But no matter how hard we tried to pretend it hadn't happened, it was always there, lingering in the air like a secret neither of us knew how to bury. I kept replaying it over and over in my head, every second stretching into something unbearable. The warmth of his lips on mine, the way his fingers had trembled against my jaw, the soft sound he made when I kissed him back, all of it burned behind my eyes, refusing to fade. And worse than the memory itself was the ache that followed it, this deep, constant longing that never seemed to go away no matter how much I told myself to stop feeling it. At night, I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if he was thinking about it too. Wondering if he regretted it as much as he claimed to. Because even though he pulled away that night, even though he said it shouldn't have happened, I could still feel the truth in the way he kissed me, like he wanted it just as badly as I did. But secrets don't stay buried forever. Not when they're this big. It was late one night when I heard him crying behind his bedroom door. I was lying in bed, trying not to think about anything, when the quiet sobs slipped through the walls and curled around me like a hand gripping my chest. I hesitated for only a second before getting up and walking down the hallway, pausing outside his room. His door was cracked open slightly, just enough for me to see him sitting on the edge of his bed, hands pressed to his face, shoulders shaking. I knocked lightly on the doorframe. He looked up instantly, startled, wiping his eyes with the sleeve of his shirt. "Hey," I said softly, unsure if I should be there. He didn't tell me to leave, so I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. I sat beside him, close but not touching, and waited. He didn't speak right away. Just sat there, breathing unevenly, like he was trying to hold himself together. "I can't stop thinking about it," he finally whispered, voice barely audible. My stomach twisted. "About what?" He let out a shaky breath, turning to look at me. "That night, when I kissed you." I swallowed hard, forcing myself to keep eye contact. "You've been avoiding me since then." "I know." He ran a hand through his hair, pulling at the strands like he needed something physical to ground himself. I don't know what to do with this, okay? I don't know what it means." I didn't either. That was the problem. We sat in silence for a while, the only sound being the distant hum of the house settling around us. Then, quietly, I asked, "Do you wish it never happened?" His eyes snapped to mine, and for a moment, I thought he might say yes. But instead, he shook his head slowly. "No," he admitted, "I don't." And just like that, the space between us shifted again. He turned toward me more fully, his expression raw with something I couldn't quite name. "I keep trying to convince myself that this is wrong," he said, voice thick with emotion. "That I should be able to forget it ever happened. But I can't. Every time I look at you, I remember how it felt." "How you felt?" I stared at him, heart hammering against my ribs. "Me too," I whispered. He exhaled sharply, running both hands down his face. "This is insane," he muttered. "We shouldn't be having this conversation. We shouldn't be feeling this way." "But we are," I said, barely above a breath. He nodded, like he already knew that. Like he'd been fighting it for days and finally realized he couldn't win. "I don't know what that makes us," he admitted. "Or what we're supposed to do about it." I didn't either. But in that moment, I knew one thing for sure, pretending wasn't working anymore. Whatever this was between us, it wasn't going away. And maybe, just maybe, it was time we stopped acting like it could. So I reached out, slowly, carefully, and placed my hand over his. He flinched slightly at the touch, like he wasn't expecting it, but then his fingers curled around mine, holding on tight. Neither of us spoke for a long time. We just sat there, hands clasped between us, breathing in sync like we were afraid to break whatever fragile connection we'd managed to rebuild. Then he leaned forward slightly, until our foreheads were resting against each other. "What do we do now?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. I didn't have an answer. Not a real one. All I knew was that I couldn't keep pretending this wasn't real. So I said the only thing I could. "Let's not pretend we don't feel this." He let out a quiet, almost broken laugh. "We're gonna get hurt," he warned. "Maybe," I agreed, "but I'd rather be honest about it than spend every day pretending." He was quiet for a long moment before he finally nodded. "Okay." And just like that, we made a silent agreement, to stop hiding from each other. To stop pretending like what we felt was a mistake. It didn't mean we had a plan. It didn't mean we knew what any of this meant. But it meant we were done pretending it didn't exist. Still, secrets are heavy. And ours was getting harder to carry. The next few weeks passed in a blur of stolen moments and quiet understanding. We were careful not to touch when others were around, careful not to linger too long in each other's company, careful not to let our eyes betray what our mouths wouldn't say. But in private, things changed. We talked more. About everything. About how we felt. About what we were scared of. About how wrong this was, and how right it somehow still felt. There were nights when we ended up on the couch together, wrapped in blankets, whispering stories to each other until the early hours of the morning. Nights when we held hands under the table at dinner, fingers entwined in secret. Moments when he would brush a thumb across my cheek when no one was looking, or when I would lean into his shoulder without thinking, letting the warmth of his body comfort me in ways nothing else could. And in those moments, I forgot about the rest of the world. I forgot about the rules, the expectations, the fear of what would happen if anyone found out. In those moments, it was just us, two people who had somehow fallen into something neither of us had planned for. But secrets don't stay hidden forever. Especially not ones this big. And soon, the cracks began to show. It started with small things, the way Mom looked at us when she thought we weren't paying attention, the way Daniel's voice changed slightly whenever he addressed us separately. There were questions that weren't really questions, like, "You two seem closer lately," or, "Are you sure you're okay with everything?" We laughed them off, shrugged them away, told ourselves we were being paranoid. But the truth was, we both knew. Our secret was slipping, and once it did, there would be no taking it back. Because no matter how much we wanted to believe we could keep this hidden forever, the reality was simple. The truth always finds a way to come out. It started with a look, the kind that said more than words ever could. I was sitting at the kitchen table, pretending to eat breakfast while Mom and Daniel talked about their plans for the weekend. Ethan was across from me, quiet as usual, but when he glanced up, our eyes met for just a second too long. It wasn't anything dramatic, not to anyone else, but to me, it felt like a spark had jumped between us. A silent understanding passed in that moment, one that we both knew we couldn't afford to let happen again. But it kept happening. The way his foot would brush mine under the table when no one was looking. The way he'd lean just a little closer when we were watching TV together, close enough that our shoulders touched without either of us saying a word. The way he'd catch me staring at him sometimes, and instead of looking away, he'd hold my gaze like he wanted me to know he saw me, really saw me, even when we weren't supposed to. And then there was the night everything changed. I had stayed up late again, scrolling through my phone without really seeing anything on the screen. I wasn't tired. Not really. My mind was too full of thoughts I didn't want to face. Thoughts about him, about us, about how much I hated pretending like nothing was happening between us when everything about being near him screamed otherwise. At some point, I heard movement downstairs. Quiet footsteps, the soft creak of the floorboards. I hesitated for only a second before getting up and walking to the top of the stairs. That's when I saw her, Mom, standing in the hallway outside Ethan's room. She wasn't knocking, she wasn't calling his name. She was just standing there, staring at the door like she was trying to decide whether or not to go in. My heart dropped. I didn't move. I barely breathed. And then, slowly, she turned and walked back toward the living room. I waited until she disappeared before slipping back into my room and closing the door behind me. My hands were shaking. My chest felt tight. She knew. Not everything, not yet, but she knew asterisk. Enough to make me feel like the ground was slipping out from under me. The next morning, things were different. Mom was quieter than usual. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes when she asked us if we wanted coffee. Daniel seemed off too, like he could sense something was wrong but didn't know what. Ethan and I didn't talk. We didn't even look at each other. We just sat there, pretending like nothing had changed. But everything had. Later that day, I found myself pacing my room, replaying the previous night over and over in my head. What had she seen? Had she heard something? Did she suspect what we were hiding? And then, just when I thought I couldn't take the silence anymore, there was a knock at my door. Can I come in? It was Ethan. I hesitated before unlocking the door and stepping aside to let him in. He closed it softly behind him and stood there for a moment, just looking at me. His expression was unreadable. She knows, I said before he could speak. His jaw tightened. Yeah, how much? He shook his head. I don't think she knows everything. But she knows something's going on. I swallowed hard. What do we do now? He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. We keep pretending. I stared at him. That's not going to work anymore. I know, he admitted. But we don't have a choice. I didn't like it. None of it. But I knew he was right. So we tried, harder this time, to act normal. To be careful. To keep our distance. But it was impossible. The tension between us had grown heavier, thicker, like it was suffocating us both. Every touch, every glance, every whispered conversation after everyone else went to bed felt like a risk we couldn't afford to take. And yet, we kept doing it anyway. Because we couldn't stop. One night, after another long day of pretending, we ended up on the couch together again. No one else was home. Just us. The house was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioner and the occasional chirp of a cricket. Outside, we sat close, not touching, but still close enough that I could feel the heat coming off his skin. I miss you, he said quietly, breaking the silence. I looked at him, surprised. You're right here. He shook his head. Not like this. Not like we used to be. I understood what he meant. Before all of this, before the kiss, before the secrets, we had been easy around each other. Comfortable. Now, everything felt like walking on glass, afraid that one wrong step would send everything crashing down. I miss that too, I admitted. But we can't go back to that. No, he agreed. We can't. There was a pause, and then he reached for my hand. I let him take it, fingers curling around mine like they belonged there. We should stop, he whispered. This, whatever this is. We should stop before someone finds out. I nodded because I knew he was right. But I didn't let go of his hand. And that's when we heard the front door open. Both of us froze. Then, panic hit. Ethan pulled his hand away instantly, jumping to his feet like he had been burned. I quickly grabbed my phone off the coffee table and pretended to be scrolling through it, trying to act casual even though my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. Mom walked in first, followed closely by Daniel. They smiled at us, unaware of the storm raging inside us both. Hey, Mom said, setting her purse down on the counter. How was your night? Good, I answered too quickly. Just watching some TV. Daniel gave us a knowing look. No trouble. Nope, Ethan said, voice steady despite the fear I knew was burning behind his eyes. They seemed satisfied. For now. But I could tell, Daniel was watching us more closely than usual. There was something in his expression, something sharp, like he was trying to read between the lines of everything we weren't saying. And later that night, when I was lying in bed, I heard them talking in the living room. She says they've been acting weird lately, Mom said, voice low but clear enough for me to hear through the thin walls. They've always been close, Daniel replied. Maybe she's just adjusting to having a sibling. It's not just that, Mom insisted. It's something else. I don't know what it is, but I feel like there's something they're not telling us. Silence. Then Daniel sighed. If there is, we'll find out eventually. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself not to cry. Because I knew what that meant. Eventually wasn't far away. And when it came, there would be no hiding from it. Whatever we had built between us, however fragile and forbidden it was starting to fall apart. And there was nothing we could do to stop it. It started with a knock on my door. Not the kind that was casual or friendly. This one was sharp, deliberate, like someone had rehearsed what they were going to say and didn't want to waste time getting to it. I knew before I even opened the door that something was wrong. Something final. I stood up slowly, my stomach already twisting itself into knots. When I pulled the door open, Mom was standing there. Her face was pale, her lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't look angry. She looked hurt, and that made it worse. "Can we talk?" she asked, voice quiet but firm. I nodded, stepping aside to let her in. She walked past me without saying anything else, turning to face me once she reached the center of the room. I closed the door behind her, bracing myself for whatever was coming. She took a deep breath, like she was trying to steady herself. "I don't know what's going on between you and Ethan," she said finally. "But I think it's time we stopped pretending it's nothing." My heart dropped. For a second, I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight, like the words were stuck somewhere inside me, too afraid to come out. I wanted to deny it. To tell her she was imagining things. But I couldn't. Not anymore. I started, but my voice cracked before I could finish. She shook her head, eyes searching mine. "I'm not stupid," she said gently. "I've seen the way you two look at each other. The way you avoid being alone together when we're around. The way you flinch whenever someone mentions his name." I swallowed hard, staring at the floor. "It wasn't supposed to happen," I whispered. "But it did," she said. I nodded, unable to meet her gaze. There was a long silence before she spoke again. "You have no idea how much I wish I could pretend I didn't see any of this," she admitted. "That I could just go back to thinking you two were just adjusting to living together. But I can't, and neither can Daniel." I looked up then, surprised. "He knows too," she nodded. "He suspected for a while. He didn't want to believe it at first. But he saw it too." I exhaled sharply, running a hand through my hair. My mind was racing, trying to figure out how to explain something I barely understood myself. "It wasn't planned," I said again, almost pleading. "We didn't mean for any of this to happen." "I know," she said softly. "And that's what makes this harder." "Harder for who?" I wanted to ask. "For me, for Ethan, for her," but I didn't say anything. I just stood there, waiting for the part where she told me it was over. Where she said we had to stop. Where she told me I had to stay away from him. Because I knew it was coming. "We can't keep living like this," she said after a moment. "It's not fair to anyone." I clenched my jaw, fighting back the tears that were threatening to spill over. "So what happens now?" I asked quietly. She hesitated, like she hated the answer she was about to give. "Daniel talked to his father," she said. "Ethan's going to be staying with his uncle for a while." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "No, please." "I'm sorry," she said, and I could hear the pain in her voice. "This isn't easy for any of us. But this, whatever this is between you two, it's not healthy. It's not right. It's not wrong," I argued, my voice cracking. "It doesn't feel wrong." Her expression softened slightly, but she didn't waver. "Sometimes feelings aren't enough," she said. "Sometimes love isn't enough." I stared at her, feeling like I was drowning. Like the ground had been ripped out from under me and there was nothing left to hold onto. "When is he leaving?" I asked, barely above a whisper. "Tomorrow," she said. The word hit me like a sledgehammer. Tomorrow. One day. That was all. The time I had left with him. I didn't say anything else. I couldn't. I just stood there, watching as she turned and walked out of the room, closing the door behind her with a soft click that sounded louder than it should have. And then I sank down onto my bed, burying my face in my hands. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just sat there, frozen, trying to process everything that had just happened. Trying to wrap my head around the fact that Ethan was leaving. That I wouldn't be able to see him every day. That I wouldn't wake up knowing he was just down the hall. That I wouldn't be able to reach for his hand under the table or catch his eye across the room. That I wouldn't get to kiss him again. Eventually, I heard a knock at my door. I didn't respond. I didn't move. The door creaked open anyway. He stepped inside, closing it behind him. His face was pale, his eyes wide with the same fear I felt burning inside me. "They told you," I said, not looking at him. He nodded slowly, walking over until he was standing in front of me. "Yeah." I finally looked up at him, searching his face for some sign that this wasn't real. That this wasn't actually happening. But it was. "They're sending me to live with my uncle," he said, voice barely audible. "They think if we're apart, this will just go away." I let out a bitter laugh. "Like that's how this works." He sat down beside me, close enough that our knees touched. "I don't want to leave," he said. "I don't want to stop seeing you." "I don't either," I whispered. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. I tried to fight it. I told them it wasn't their decision. That they don't understand what this is between us. But they won't listen. I swallowed hard. "They think they're protecting us. They're ripping us apart," he muttered. Silence settled between us, thick and suffocating. Then, suddenly, he turned to me, reaching for my hand. "We don't have to say goodbye," he said, gripping my fingers tightly. "Not really. We can still talk. We can still see each other when we can." I shook my head. "It won't be the same." "I know," he admitted. "But it's better than nothing." I stared at him, trying to memorize every detail of his face, the way his dark hair fell over his forehead, the faint scar above his eyebrow, the way his lips curved slightly even when he was sad. I wanted to remember everything about him. Every single thing. And then, without thinking, I leaned forward and kissed him. It was desperate, messy, full of everything we weren't allowed to say out loud. He kissed me back instantly, like he needed this just as much as I did. His hand came up to cup my face, holding me close, anchoring me to him like he never wanted to let go. And for a few seconds, we forgot everything else. Forgot the rules. Forgot the consequences. Forgot that we weren't supposed to want this. But reality always finds a way to break through. A noise from the hallway snapped us both out of it. We pulled apart instantly, breathing heavily, eyes wide with panic. Someone was coming. Ethan stood up quickly, smoothing out his shirt. "I should go," he said, voice low. I nodded, swallowing hard. Yeah, he hesitated, like he wanted to say something else, but then he just turned and walked toward the door. Before he opened it, he looked back at me one last time. I'll find a way to reach you, he promised. I swear. And then he was gone. I sat there for a long time after that, staring at the empty space where he had been. My lips still tingled from his kiss. My chest ached like I had lost something vital. And maybe I had, because the next morning, he was gone. His room was empty, his stuff packed, his side of the closet bare. I walked in and stood there for a long time, just staring at the space where his things used to be. My fingers brushed against the wall where he used to hang his headphones. His pillow still smelled like him. I sank down onto his bed and buried my face in the sheets, letting out a breath that felt like it had been trapped inside me for days. And that's when I finally let myself cry. Because he was gone, and I didn't know if I'd ever get him back. Time didn't heal anything. Not really. It just made the pain quieter, easier to ignore, like a dull ache that never quite goes away no matter how much you try to pretend it's not there. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and Ethan was still gone. I told myself I was getting used to it, that I was learning how to live without him in my everyday life. But the truth was, I missed him constantly. In the mornings when I walked past his old room and saw the door closed. At night when I lay awake in bed and remembered how we used to whisper to each other until the early hours of the morning. Even in the stupidest little moments, like when I heard a song he used to play on repeat or saw someone who looked like him from behind. I tried not to fall apart. I kept going to school, kept up with my classes, smiled when people talked to me. But inside, everything felt hollow. Like I was just going through the motions, pretending to be okay when I wasn't. Mom and Daniel noticed, of course. They didn't push me to talk about it, but sometimes I'd catch Mom watching me with this sad expression in her eyes. She never asked if I was okay. Maybe because she already knew the answer. And then, one day, I got a letter. It came in the mail like any other envelope, addressed in handwriting I hadn't seen in months. My heart stopped when I saw his name written across the front. I almost didn't open it, afraid of what it might say. Afraid it would make things worse instead of better. But eventually, I did. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly. His words were careful, deliberate, like he had rewritten them a dozen times before finally sending it. Hey, asterisk he wrote. I don't even know where to start. I guess part of me thought time would make this easier. That being away from you would help me forget how much I miss you. But it hasn't. It's only made me realize how much I want to fight for us. Asterisk. I read it over and over again, tracing the ink with my fingers like I could somehow feel him through the paper. He went on to tell me about his life with his uncle, how different it was, how hard it was to adjust. He said he hated being so far away. Hated not seeing me every day. Hated how much he wanted to reach out and couldn't, because he knew our families were watching us both too closely now. I know we're not supposed to feel this way, asterisk he wrote. I know people will say it's wrong. But I can't keep pretending like this doesn't mean something real. Because it does. And I think you know that too. Asterisk. I swallowed hard, blinking back tears as I read the last few lines. If you still feel the same way, if you still want to try, I do too. We'll have to be careful. We'll have to be patient. But I'm willing to wait. I'm willing to fight. If you are. Asterisk. That was all it took. The next day, I sat down with a blank piece of paper and started writing back. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know if we were making a mistake. But I knew one thing for sure, I still loved him. And if he was willing to fight for us, then so was I. It wasn't easy after that. We had to be careful. We couldn't call each other. Couldn't text too often. So we wrote letters, long, detailed ones that took days to arrive, filled with everything we couldn't say out loud. We talked about everything, how we were doing, how our lives had changed, how much we missed each other. And slowly, carefully, we started rebuilding what we had lost. Sometimes it hurt more than I expected. Sometimes reading his words made me ache in ways I hadn't realized I could ache. But it also gave me hope. The kind of hope that made me believe maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. Eventually, we started meeting in secret. Small moments, stolen whenever we could manage it. A weekend trip to visit a friend. A family event where we could pretend we were just running into each other. Every time, we acted like nothing was happening between us. But in those quiet seconds when no one else was looking, we found ways to touch, a brush of fingers, a lingering glance, a soft smile that only we understood. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But it was real. And slowly, I started feeling like myself again. Not the version of me who pretended Ethan didn't exist. Not the version who tried to bury everything we had shared. But the version of me who had fallen in love with him, despite everything that was stacked against us. Because here's the thing about love, it doesn't always follow the rules. It doesn't care about what society says is right or wrong. It doesn't stop just because people tell you it should. Sometimes, love is messy, complicated, forbidden, but sometimes, it's the only thing that feels true. And I was done pretending mine wasn't real. If this story moved you, leave a comment below. Tell us your story. Have you ever loved someone you weren't supposed to? Did you fight for it? Or did you let it go? Hit the like button if this resonated with you, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that matter. Love isn't always simple, but it's always worth telling.